Hey everyone, this is Micah with Service Reef. I am so excited today about this conversation with Scott Elequin, who is the Executive Director, CEO of Switchboard. And Scott and I have known each other for a little bit and have a lot of conversations. And today we really want to just dive into technology within the mission space, which within the nonprofit space. How do we engage churches, NGOs, others to kind of help make a difference? And also just talk in general, kind of about what we see from our vantage points within this space. So Scott, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed spending time with you at Missio Nexus, and I look forward to this conversation.
This will be exciting. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Scott. What is it that you do and what does Switchboard do?
Well, I grew up in Texas, and very excited about Longhorn football this year for the first time, I think, in a long time. I know you could cut this part out, but I just thought I'd get that on, record. So basically, I really grew up, like a lot of our volunteers that heavily involved in church, singing choir, working the kids ministry on the finance team and all those things. But I was actually running an Oracle consulting firm for many, many years. I came up in that world, big computer systems, and never really had a chance to do much in my faith because it just wasn't very compatible. When I met my wife, she had just come back from being a missionary in Mexico. My kids went on lots and lots of short-term mission trips like what you guys do. And it was just never something I could be involved in. And so we had an opportunity to exit that firm in 2019. I had gone through Colson Fellows to really kind of shore up my Christian worldview training and was really looking for something new to do. And that's when Switchboard happened. There were some folks here in Austin that were really looking for a way to serve. And we found that the unique blend of, my startup world and technology skills and the ability to bring things together made it possible to do something that was really very different in the mission space.
That's awesome. I'm going to ask you more about that in a second, Scott. But
Sure.
within that journey, tell me a little bit about what was that journey into Switchboard? What does Switchboard do? And then how have you guys kind of gotten to that point from a technology perspective or as a business perspective, however you want to kind of cover that?
Sure. Well, so it's interesting because I was the Oracle guy. It's a big software company that, I had all the logo t-shirts and license plate and all that kind of stuff. And when we sold the company, I think I felt that, there was something out there for me, something new. And so I got involved with a lot of startup activity. And I'm currently still on the board of a startup group here in Austin, but I was at a downtown meeting and everybody's talking about their billion-dollar startup and they're going to create this new thing. It was amazing and awesome. And I had just told somebody a little bit about this idea of Switchboard, which is to connect everyday believers with mission organizations so they could work together. And, this is a pretty big group. And this woman who's the CEO of a local company, she circles back about 20 minutes later. She's like, "You're talking about missionary stuff, aren't you?" I was like, hair stands up on the back of my neck. I'm like, "Yeah, that's exactly right." And it's funny. So she and I had a 15-minute conversation. I was walking back to my car that evening, and I just thought, I have to quit my job. I have to do this. And so it was a really interesting turn of events. From a faith perspective, I've felt God calling me in different directions many, many times, but I never had a dramatic Paul, scales from the eyes, turn around, whoa, what happened kind of thing. And I got home that evening and I told my wife, Melanie, that I really felt like I should quit my job. And I was working as a chief revenue officer for a software company. And she's like, "Okay, if that's what you feel like you're called to do, then it's time to do it." And as it turns out, I had a meeting scheduled already with my boss the next morning. That was a Thursday. Told him I was going to leave to go do this thing. And then I had a meeting scheduled with two of our board members for lunch the next Monday. And they come in, we're sitting down, we're kind of ordering and getting ready. And they're like, "Okay, so here's the reason we asked you to lunch. We think you should quit your job. We think you need to do this full time. It's time for this to happen." And I was like, well, I quit my job on Thursday and I'm ready to go. And it was just one of those God moments that if you tried to script it and you put it in a movie, nobody would believe it. Truth is strange is stranger than fiction because fiction has to at least sound like it's true. And so when you look at something like that, and you look at the fact that, we provided remote Oracle services, very clear scope. The way we did things as a business was very unusual in the space. And what we did then and what we need to do today by connecting volunteers virtually so that they can work with Great Commission organizations, and a lot of the things that we actually pioneered and perfected starting in about 2008 up until we sold the business in 2019. So it's pretty amazing that we ended up in this position, honestly.
That's awesome. One more question about your journey, Scott, is in this transition from private to more of a I'm serving nonprofits. I'm trying to get into kingdom work. Tell me a little bit about more of that transition. What was easy for you? What was a challenge? Like what still might be a challenge for you as you're kind of extending into this space and trying to leverage where you feel God very much calling you to?
So Micah, I think that's a really good question. I think from the way I'm wired and a skill set perspective, it could not be more dead on. I mean, I'm very much into channels, into partnership. I feel like we can all work better together if we work on things as a group. Kingdom organizations are very collaborative and very willing to share things, which is amazing. I think where I've struggled and probably will always still struggle is, when you're in a consulting business, it tends to be really fast paced. We're in a technology consulting business, especially with startups, it's accelerated, it's exponentiated, it's really fast paced. And then you move into the nonprofit world or the missional world, and it's like, well, before we start working on this problem, we should pray about it. And I'm like, pray about it? You should have prayed before you came here. Like, we're here to work. And it's taken a real time to trust God a little bit to kind of change, get a different mindset around how things are working. And actually early on, I'm kind of like, okay, let's set a meeting, let's call it out. I'll be done Friday. I need that by Monday. And frankly, mission organizations and churches and nonprofits in general, they just approach things differently. It's a different mindset. And I was talking to someone and I said, I just felt like in the Oracle world, I was like the nice guy. Scott, he's such a nice guy. And I said, I feel like in the mission world, I'm kind of the edgy guy. I'm the impatient guy. And he leans in, we were on a Zoom call, and he's like, Scott, sometimes we could use a little edgy in missions. I'm like, okay, well, then maybe I am uniquely gifted and uniquely called and uniquely wired, as much as sometimes I'm uncomfortable in this space. And as much as I probably make everybody we work with a little uncomfortable, it's just really fun to feel like, maybe I'm not the thing. Maybe Switchboard isn't the thing that makes it all happen, but we're the drop, we're the catalyst that causes things to create a different composition or come into a new structure that makes things possible. So it's different. I mean, I think coming in, we felt like we knew more than we knew about what was needed and about missions and about what expectations should be. So that was a little bit of a maturation process as well. But in general, it's been an awesome and amazing journey.
That's awesome. I think of some of my journeys got a little bit over the last few months has been really learning to operate out of a spirit of trust or fear. As a business leader, right? You're looking at certain things. You're like, okay, if this happens, this happens, this happens. But stepping back and saying, okay, God, but I'm trusting you. You've called us into this space. How do I allow that trust to happen? And even at the pace of which things operate, sometimes, Scott, you're like, it's kind of like God math and God timing. Sometimes you're like, okay, I just have to trust I'm here for this.
Yeah, it's really cool because what our team has believed since day one, first thing is we felt like, God has created this immense capacity and resources that we could do everything that we're called to do in terms of the Great Commission. But the percentage that actually gets applied or invested or allocated to the Great Commission is fairly measurable. But the thing that was really that created a sense of calm for us is we really believe that God, it is time for the rest of the body to be involved in the Great Commission. We just believe it. It's the right thing to do, but we don't feel like it's on us to do it. So back to your point, it's like, so maybe this is a relay race and maybe we get to finish the race. Maybe it all happens, but it's like, it's okay if we're the second leg of a 4-leg race. Doesn't mean we run any slower. Doesn't mean we do absolutely our very best to get to where we need to be, but maybe ultimately we hand the baton off to somebody who is smarter than us or better funded us or some new technology or new world circumstance makes something feasible before it really was feasible. Maybe we got there too soon. So to me, knowing that it's our job to do our absolute best every day, to run the race, to do everything we can, but it's okay if we're not the guys, back in the startup world, the gets to the public offering, it's like, we don't have to get to a public offering. We just have to like fulfill the purpose and the mission that God has put on our desk at this time. And that makes it really cool. It's very freeing that you can take risk, you could try things, but you don't have to worry about, the stock price. You don't have to worry about a lot of different things because we're very missionally minded.
I think that's awesome. As you've stepped into this space, Scott, and we've talked a little bit about some of the differences between private and nonprofit, or the church space, but do you, the question I have is, what is the biggest misconception you see about either technology or engaging into this space, or maybe some headwinds that you've had to kind of face and navigate to kind of help folks get on board? Because there is a different pace, there's a different mindset kind of coming at it.
So specific to Switchboard,
In your experience, yeah, it could be Switchboard, or it could be kind of in general, just building those partnerships out as well, either one.
yeah, so it's really interesting. I would tell you for the record that there were at least 2 times that we thought we should quit. We're here to test the hypothesis, and everybody says they want to help, but only certain people want to help. And everybody says they want like more volunteers involved, but at the end of the day, they're kind of like, volunteers are kind of a headache, and it's because they're in a different paradigm. You ask a mission organization, would you like some volunteers? They're like, yeah. But if you say, would you like somebody that, could proofread documents for you or be an editor? They're like, well, sure. Would you like somebody who's awesome at human resources that you could just call when you had an HR question? Of course, that would be awesome. How about somebody that can update your website? Are you kidding? That's like it's like, so when we recast it from the perspective of a need that we know that they're experiencing, the consumption went through the roof. Really, really different. Now, the same thing on the Kingdom Consultant side, the volunteers we call Kingdom Consultants, is getting really clear expectations. Everybody, ultimately, you come back from a short-term trip, you want to serve. You just get out of a 6-week, thing on Matthew or a perspectives class, and you're like, you want to serve. And then 3 months later, you're like, well, I'm kind of busy, and we're coming into Christmas season, and you kind of get busy. And so you never connect that desire to serve with the relationship that's on the other side. So let's say I'm a well engineer, or I'm a story writer. I write stories. So I start meeting with someone that runs a ministry in Southeastern Asia, and I get to know them, and I know their kids, and I understand what they're doing. And all of a sudden I'm writing these stories. It's like when something happens, I'm now vested. Those are my people. There was a storm. There was a huge storm in the Philippines. I gotta check and see if my people are good. So this idea that it's real, I think for typical Christians, or for me at least, missionaries are always kind of mysterious. They come maybe once a year, and they have like handmade goods, and they tell these stories, and they have all these pictures, but they're not like real people. And then you realize they're really just like anybody else. They just live someplace else, whether they grew up here or they grew up in Malaysia. I mean, they're just another person in the body of Christ. And so I think that for the missional side, they needed to get a sense that this really is co-labor. This is someone that's participating in your ministry. And for the volunteer, it's like, you're actually involved. You're on the team. You're part of their solution. I mean, once we kind of realized the humanity behind it, that supply and demand just took care of itself. But it took a year of different things, of asking the questions over and over, and then watching the way people responded before we realized that there are certain ways that you have to package it before people even see it, because there's decades of expectations that have been set based on kind of the way things have always been. And it's just different now.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Going up to almost like a 10,000 foot level for a second, like, you've had a lot of conversations with mission agencies, with other partners, you're developing partnership, just in your experience. Where do you see technology within this church missions mobilization space maybe headed in the next 5 years? Are there certain trends that you're kind of seeing from your perspective?
Wow. Okay, so that's a very open-ended question. I would tell you that at the grassroots, the adoption side, there's a lot of organizations that feel like because they're on Zoom now, they're done, they're good. And so, bringing this kind of an expectation, and if you think about, you could look at Starlink, you could look at smartphones, you can look at platforms like Uber and Lyft and eBay. It's like you literally could talk to somebody like anywhere in the world face to face live right now. You just need to get the right equipment in place. And so the adoption in general, the holistic adoption is very, very limited. And there's not much going on there. And when you bring something new in, it's life changing. You can't believe that you could literally click a button and have a volunteer help you with something within a couple of hours. It's like, but for us, they're already in there. So all we have to do is see if they're awake and see if they can respond. And so it's a very different paradigm. Now, if you look at, there's a lot of larger organizations that have some really cool stuff going on. I mean, just last week I was in Orlando. There's a group called Missional.ai. It's artificial intelligence for kingdom organizations, which we've seen it be really good with translation. But now you're looking at it for kingdom growth. Within Switchboard, we've got some really cool stuff that takes an AI model and looks at some characteristics of the volunteer or the request and suggests different ways that you could put that together so it's much easier to understand. I mean, it's absolutely life-changing. And then even with the Lausanne movement. And so there's a lot of big organizations where kind of the top technical people in the faith space get together. And from a conceptual standpoint, looking at building an artificial intelligence model that is scripturally infused so that it's not misleading. AI is only as smart as what you feed into it. So, creating platforms that allow you to put, something like Service Reef in the cloud, but it can't be compromised by some terms of use agreement from a global provider for cloud infrastructure. I mean, there's a lot of things going on. So I think a lot of the groundwork has been established, but what we haven't seen yet is the adoption. We haven't seen those killer apps, other than YouVersion or a handful of things that, lots and lots of people have downloaded. The ability to take those things and bring them together so that they're meaningful from a faith perspective is still not there yet. We don't have the kind of startup community that looks for that new thing that could be done with the existing pieces is in place, which frankly is what Switchboard has got. I mean, existing technology, existing infrastructure with existing access. We didn't build Starlink, we didn't build the smartphone, but it's like we took things that already existed and we assembled them in a way that is purpose-built specifically for the deployment of everyday believers with mission organizations. And it all works. And it's crazy that all we had to do is put the pieces that already existed together. So I think that's the piece that's really the next wave, is that, technologists in the faith space are going to really focus on the things they could do to, how do you make a short-term mission trip more cost-effective? How do you bring churches across denominations together to go on short-term mission trips together? Those are all the types of things that could happen. I mean, how could Service Reef maybe help take a lot of the legwork out of what it takes to go book those things and do all the business arrangements behind them? There's so many things that can now happen that frankly, it's going to take smart business people or smart missionally minded, nonprofits to go make that happen in order to, really get the benefit from those advances in technology.
I think that I've seen in some cases, Scott, where it's like people feel like they have a secular skill and a spiritual skill. And I'm seeing that blend more and more, which is awesome because I think those technology people are starting to think that way. We're starting to bring that in. But you brought up a point in that space that sometimes it feels as if nonprofits or churches are not as quick to adopt technology in this space. Is that been your experience? And if so, like, why do you think that might be?
I think there's I'll give you two different answers. I think that one is a scarcity mindset. So for example, there's a lot of great tools to help you automate pretty much everything. I'll say in the church space specifically to do a lot of different things, tools that you could turn on that would extend your reach, would help you with your video production and disseminating information and engaging your community and things like that. But there's kind of a sense that you only spend money when you have no other option. And it's like, well, one of our, deacons has a nephew who's really good with computers. Let me see if he can do it first before we actually spend money on it. And so there's this kind of sense of, is it good enough? And if that's good enough, we're not looking at, return on investment in that space. We're not looking at the point of diminishing returns. We're looking at cost. And so cost and effectivity, I don't think we're very good at that in the kingdom space because we've always dealt with a scarcity mindset. And one thing that at Switchboard we always use is ROKI. It's return on kingdom investment, which suggests that what gives you the biggest kingdom impact from the investment you make, whether it's time or money. And so I think that's the first thing, is that investment really gets channeled towards cost and not really what's the right way to spend money. So that's kind of the first thing. I think the second thing is that, a lot of missional organizations, and I'll say more, this is probably more on the mission side, I think, than on the church side, is that there's a lot of tradition. There's a lot of the way we do things. And I mean, I've talked about Switchboard to groups of people that are missionally minded, and it was very upsetting because they're like, well, what do you mean? It's so sad that we've been doing it poorly all these years. And I'm like, these tools literally didn't exist 10 years. To try to do what we're doing now 10 years ago would have been maybe impossible, if not crazy expensive. And now we can do it for pennies on the day. It's incredible because all that groundwork has been laid. And the second thing is that, if you look at the leadership in the missional community, you don't have a lot of people that got their degrees in electrical engineering. They don't have their people that came from the startup world. So it's a little bit of a different culture. They're somewhat isolated and not necessarily aggregated. And so I think this is changing quickly, but a friend of mine had shown me a slide a while back that talked about the percentage of mission organizations that, use technology heavily in their, in their businesses and in their operations. And I think it was like 1 in 750 that really uses technology as a core thing, as part of their business model, as opposed to just kind of overhead or back office or accounting kind of stuff. And terrorists actually, can use something like Signal or Telegram or encryption or encoding or things like that. It's like 1 in 3. And so in some ways, we're really behind the curve, just because as organizations, that's not really been where our focus has been. It's more been face-to-face, human discipleship, which are all fantastic things. But there's a lot of tools that are now being built that can be infused into that, like what Crusade's got, God tools, or Goddess has got ways that people can use existing platforms to do their fundraising and things like that. So there's little pieces of it yet, but it is really more about a use case and solving a particular problem than it is, thinking about the problem and then overlaying that problem on a technology framework, and then taking that framework and looking at viability and what it would take to go make it happen.
Okay, so shifting a little bit from kind of technology and adoption within the companies, you're in a unique space to be able to talk a little bit more about the motivation for getting people involved. So one question I had for you, Scott, is, in your opinion, what do you feel people feel kind of as friction that keeps them from being more involved in their church and serving opportunities and missions, et cetera? Like, talk to me a little bit about the folks that are going to church, and why aren't they sometimes, and I know it's generic, so every unique case is, every case is their own, but from your experience, kind of, are there trends that you see or other things that you've seen on that motivation side?
Trends. So I think it's more of a revelation. I think that for a long, long time, actually, if you went way back when, it's like, you want to go on field, your only choice is to pack up and move and maybe never come home again. So now people are ships and then airplanes. So people come back every quarter. They do sabbaticals on a regular basis. But at the end of the day, anybody that cares about missions, people that go on short-term mission trips that come back, they're like, well, you can pray, or you can help pay for someone to go, or you can do a short-term trip. And that's really the only thing. And then frankly, a lot of times when people engage around service, I may be a patent attorney and I'm, painting walls, or I might be, you don't do things within your skill set. So you feel like this is, is this really needed? This mission trip, I'm a guitarist and I'm building a house and it's going to be terrible. Is this really, am I helping? Or is this just kind of like a vacation where you work and get a heart for the ministry? And so I think many, many, many people just feel like, well, John, missions is dumb. I can't help. Volunteering is dumb. And frankly, when we first started, one of the reasons we dumped the word volunteer is that people felt like it meant doing dumb stuff that doesn't really help. And so when we started calling it Kingdom Consultants, it said, well, if you're a X, I'm a WordPress guy, would you like to help, some help with your website? It's like, I'm great at that. I mean, we've had people that, I had a guy who's really great at accounting principles, and there was a gal in Eastern Europe that didn't understand revenue recognition very well. And so she thought one thing that wasn't true, and she thought she was going to have to come home because she couldn't afford to stay because her taxes were going to be so high. She did a consultation call with one of our folks, and he's like, "What are you talking about? That's gross profit. You pay on net profit." And totally changed her mindset, rocked her world. This guy calls me. He's like, "You wouldn't believe this awesome call I was just on. I totally changed her world. It was amazing." And so the ability to take something you're really good at and do something that is like, that's so far beyond what the person in the field needs, it just blows them away. Building spreadsheets that have links so you can update inventory automatically. We had a family that had an autistic child. Their child in Ukraine was just diagnosed with autism, and we connected them with a family that had raised an autistic son. And now all of a sudden, you realize that your unique gifting and calling for the Great Commission is this child that you love, but you've really struggled with for years, because now you can really, encourage and lift someone up that's going through the same thing, that now maybe won't have to come home because they have the ability to kind of work through some issues. It's like, your calling is whatever your calling is. So I think that one of the reasons why we've been building tools is that most people feel like, yeah, that they're not really called to the Great Commission. I'll say it just as simply as that. And we've got a t-shirt that says, "I am called," because it's like, you are called to the Great Commission. And so you think about that, it's like, and then it's like, well, then who are you? Well, I'm a high school football coach, but obviously you can't use me to, like, in the Great Commission. And then you find out that almost every ministry in the world has a sports, has sports ministries as part of what they do. And the guy that's running the soccer camp, got his MDiv and New Testament and undergrad in Greek translation, and they're like, they don't know how to set up in a competition for a bunch of kids playing soccer. So engaging people in that way, in their gifting and calling, once they see that it's possible, the change happens pretty quickly. When you're an accountant, and I could show you 50 different ways accountants who have directly helped a missionary in the field with whatever it is, pick an accounting software, file a 990, whatever it is, you're like, well, I could have done 2/3 of those things. Why didn't anybody ask me? It's like, well, put your name in and somebody will ask you. So that's really been the big thing on that side from the believer side, is that they don't really believe that they can serve. And so to us, we go to a church, there's 5% that really want to serve, and they're looking for us. I mean, they're like looking for us. Then there's another 5% that really wants to serve, that kind of gave up, and they're not really looking for us anymore. Then when we show up, they're like, "You're kidding. This is awesome." And they're in. And then there's another group of people that once they see the benefit and they see that they can really be helpful, then they're willing to serve and will do so happily. And then there's a lot of people that basically say they want to serve that, really don't want to be bothered. And so, to me, we're trying to really activate the people who are really looking for ways to serve, that feel called to serve. And we're going to leave it to the local missions pastors to change the hearts of the rest of them, so that they will recognize that they really are called to serve and there's a meaningful place. Now, the thing that's different, though, is that we're going to give them a lot of ammunition. Here are 40 people at your church who are already serving, and here are the kinds of things that they're doing. You may not serve, but it's because you don't want to serve, not because you couldn't find a place to serve, because there's a place to serve.
And I feel like in that space, this is another private business concept that is, like that KPI, I like your kingdom consultant, or kingdom impact, right? Of like, hey, let's change the terminology. Let's think about this and going, hey,
Right.
God's given us each gifts within our own careers, within our own abilities, our own experiences. How are you being a good steward of that within that
Right.
space? Right. And so
That's
it's
exactly
fun to
right.
change that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, I could give you like a contagion, like a continuum of ongoing challenges. I mean, really, number one challenge for this year is change management and getting in front of a lot of people to sign them as kingdom consultants, because pretty much everybody thinks there's no way for them to serve. And how do you get in front of them in the best way possible? And we've got a marketing strategy we put together that's got at least 40 different ways that we're kind of A/B testing to see whether or not this works better than that. And so at some point we'll crack the code, and people that want to serve will start finding us. And then you'll hit that atomic network. You'll reach a point where the thing just kind of self-sustains and just take the hands off of it and you let it go. The demand on the mission side is huge. I mean, those guys get it now because we've demonstrated value, and it's a close community. So Steve Richardson at Pioneers or Brent McHugh at Christar, it's like, well, Brent says you're good, then you're good. So what do we need to do? And so it's interesting how quickly the adoption has been on the demand side. We just got to get in front of a lot more people so that we can get them engaged in the Great Commission.
Yeah. So that's one of the bigger challenges coming up this year. What's something that gets you really excited, Scott, about the next year?
Well, I mean, I'll give you two answers. One is that we really feel like in the last 8 weeks, we feel like we've really demonstrated the demand side hypothesis holds, that people really do need help and are really willing to help. And then when you put people together, both sides are over the moon. So it's like we went from, well, I think God wants us to do this, to, trying to figure out the way. And then all of a sudden it's like it clicked, and it just happened. This just happened since late January of this year. It's like, wow, it happened. Somebody needs to do this thing. So that was really cool. I think that the most exciting thing longer term is all of a sudden you see missional or faith organizations coming together. So again, at the Missional AI conference, it's like, wow, you talk to organizations that provide Bible apps, you talk to organizations that provide communications, you talk to organizations that provide social networking. I mean, it's like, these are all things that are body of believer applications that bring lots of people. We'll have 1 million people on the platform and probably 25,000 mission organizations on the platform. Well, it just feels like everybody's willing to share. They're like, well, you got 1 million people and they need this. Can we just connect them so that they can get that too? And we're like, awesome. So I think that the us bringing a guy in Austin, to someone in Malaysia to work together is very exciting. And I could do that till the end of my days. But watching different organizations who currently operate in silos saying, hey, I want to help that guy too, is different. It's different. So the convergence of the technologies and the data and the objectives of these organizations, which are all kingdom minded, but they all do really specific things. It's like, man, we pull together and everything gets better. So I'm psyched about that. I think that could be a really, really cool thing to be able to live long enough to watch it happen, honestly.
That's awesome. Well, and I love the shift as well. I also feel that in the last 5 years, there's been a lot of shift from proprietary of like, these are my folks that I'm trying to walk through the process to, hey, this is someone I have going through the process. I'm mobilizing them, and they're better fit over here, or we don't have field offices here. They really feel called to this area. Let me see if I can help you connect. Right. And all of a sudden it becomes that more networking where we're like, our end goal is the kingdom. It's not this person, like, what is the best fit for this person where God's called them? And that shifts a whole mindset. Right.
Completely. And I'll tell you, the other thing is, you kind of touched on the faith at work movement. Well, as it turns out, believe it or not, a lot of those people sitting in churches also work someplace. A lot of them own businesses. And so the idea that I could use an assessment that helps me understand how I could best be involved in mission work, but then be able to use a similar assessment in my business so I can look how my teams work together. It's like, it gives you some platforms to connect the faith at work movement with like the global church, the big C church, or the faith work movement. I mean, we're building dashboards for businesses to be able to look at how their employees are being involved with missional activities around the world. And so, you start to take all those things that, where Christians, I don't know, I think I always grew up feeling like there were more of us than other people. So if you didn't like say what you were, you're probably a Christian. And now all of a sudden, somehow the whole script got flipped. Well, the buying power of faith-minded individuals, the ability for, maybe me as an executive to hire somebody that is a believing Christian. There's so many things that we could do better together in our work life and our day jobs, that if we just knew more and were a little prescriptive and paid attention, we could do things that would add so much to the body as well that we just don't do. So I think that the opportunities aren't just breaking silos within NGOs or within faith mission organizations, but it's also Christians in general, regardless of what they're doing or where they're doing.
Which the next question I have is, and we're kind of starting to wrap up a little bit here, Scott, but is there any one piece of advice that you would share with others about coming into this mission space in knowing that they could come in from a leadership perspective of their own organization or church to, hey, these could be folks that are trying to help coordinate or serve within various capacities within their body. Any piece of advice that comes to mind?
Yeah. So what I think the thing for me is don't settle. Don't settle. I mean, there's a lot of things that have been done in the most effective possible way forever that are now, not the most effective way to do things. So, I mean, to me, what we tell mission organizations is that we want you to know that the world has changed. And we tell them how. Said we don't want you to settle. Don't accept the status quo. If you can bring 5 people from around the world that have specific skills so you can now reach another village or get to another household or things like that, then for goodness sakes, go get the resources. We may be starving, but it's not because we don't have food. We have all the resources we need for the Great Commission. And I want, people that are missionally minded, especially that are in leadership, I want them to be like grabby, go get it, make it happen, try different things, look at the tools, don't be hard-headed. But I mean, the willingness and the ability to think outside boxes, which frankly don't exist anymore, because there's an existing structure, I think is a really, it's a really different thing. And frankly, if you look at how the mission organizations have changed from, traditional missions only to adding in businesses missions, Christar's adding a third thread that is basically getting everybody involved, working remotely through pathways into missions. It's marketplace professionals. It's also local missionaries. Bringing resources to the table for someone in Thailand to go into Cambodia is way easier than getting someone from Tulsa to go to Cambodia. So I think in some ways, just like every commercial organization, especially if they're in the startup space, they infuse themselves with lots of new ideas. They bring in outsiders. They collaborate with a lot of organizations. It's time to do that now. It's really time to do that. And right now, mission organizations do 10 things. They do the 2 things that are their core, what they care about, really well. And they do the other 8 things to the minimum they could get away with doing it because somebody has to do it. And so for the ability for some mission organizations to become experts and specialize in something so that other mission organizations can consume those services and be better at it, and they're specializing in something else. I mean, that's kind of the way that the market works. And we just haven't done that before. And I think a more collaborative spirit is going to really make a difference.
I think that's awesome. And I think you could even back that up with scripture too, Scott, of just like all of us are we're bearing each other's burdens. We're walking through, whether it's Galatians 6 or
Right.
other things. So that's
Right.
cool.
Right.
Any book recommendations or podcast follow recommendations, things that you think about or,
Oh, wow. So I'll tell you I do, I'm trying not to look over at my shelf because I should know it. I really enjoyed Steve Richardson's book. I don't see it. So Steve Richardson, the Pioneers, wrote a book that's kind of the future of missions. I think that's an excellent book. Ted Essler of Missio Nexus has got The Innovation Crisis, which talks a lot about movement and technology and how it's created some opportunity for growth in the space, but it's also had some organizations kind of hunkering down just to try to survive. Podcasts, I really like Dustin Elliott has Unreached. And these are kind of stories from the field, which has been really impactful, which is, I think, an excellent one. What else? You can always use the Bible. Apparently, there's some really good things in Corinthians. There's some stuff in Matthew that would be very helpful as well. And for me, a favorite, I don't have my sweatshirt, but it's right over on the chair, the Chosen. So, trying to find a way to kind of hook into his, Great Commission episode and be flashed on the screen, because then 100 billion people would go sign up for Switchboard and actually do something about it. So anyway.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Where can listeners engage with you more? Either, how would you, or learn more about Switchboard? Where's a good place for them to learn more?
Yeah. So the website is globalswitchboard.io. globalswitchboard.io. And then actually, if you hit there's a support line on there. You click that, and I'll make sure that comes to me. Just say you want to talk to Scott. And I think the other thing I would tell your listeners, I mean, we just launched the virtual roles. I mean, we piloted it in late January. We really rolled it to production about 5 weeks ago. We have almost 100 service opportunities that are 100% remote based on skill set. It's like you're a teacher and you want to help out with academic credentialing. You're a human resources expert and you want to be an advisor to somebody. You're good at marketing and you want to be the guy or gal that updates somebody's website. All of those things are there now. I mean, you literally, if you go through and you fill out a profile, it takes about 3 to 5 minutes to basically fill out a Kingdom Consultant profile. And then you could go through and start shopping immediately for opportunities for service. You click one button and you can be introduced to the missionary to kind of talk about whether or not service makes sense from both sides. So, I mean, there's ways for you to do service today. And, within the next 2 months, I expect lots more because the mission organizations are now learning about what's possible. So.
That is so exciting, and engaging that 99%, right? Like everyone else there is such a huge piece.
Exactly. I mean, it's really true. And I just think that, I'll give you my hypothesis is that we're going to look back 10 years and it's going to be so many cool things have happened. But if you really looked at who really benefited, I think the mission organizations will achieve more. I think they'll be more specialized. I think they have the ability to do more things. But the heart of the believer, who thought the missionaries were mysterious and didn't know where Djibouti or Mauritius is, it's like, those are the guys that are going to be impacted. I mean, you see it. People, blah, 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 missions, blah, blah, blah. Then they go on a short-term mission trip and it changes their life, right? So what percentage of people take a short-term mission trip? You probably know the exact number. 1%, 3%?
Not high.
It's like, so you could literally go on a short-term mission trip this afternoon if you just go into the system, find a way to engage and get involved. So to me, that's really where we expect to see the real change of heart is going to be with the local church and with the individuals who, for whatever reason, never went. Now they can go.
Yeah, I think that is so exciting and where things can go. Yeah. So is there any one question you wish I'd asked you, Scott?
Well, I think we covered everything that I would have put on the boards. That was the last one. I want to make sure that people know how to reach us if they're interested. And frankly, I do believe that in terms of what you're doing of putting people on planes, putting them on the ground, face to face, I think it fits really well with what we're doing. And so to me, at some point, I could easily see that people are signing on and doing a 1-hour call, or they're taking on a virtual role, that they're going to say, you know what? I really love working with people in Dominican Republic or in the Philippines or in Malaysia. I want to go. And so to me, finding a way that we can, take the experience that you guys are bringing them and really activating their hearts and connecting with what we're doing so that we can kind of keep the fire burning is really special, because I think that's going to create more opportunities for short-term service. And then frankly, it will also create more opportunities for people to say, you know what, I'm a petroleum engineer. I'm just going to go. I could work from there. And so there's all these different things that if we were working together, I think there's a lot of things we could do together. So a specific question, no, but I mean, to me, as a way to close, we really want to find ways that we can encourage the people that you guys are really taking care of and vice versa.
I appreciate that. And I'd say that I think our hearts are aligned in that, of Scott, of like both Switchboard and Service Reef are coming more from the side of how do we encourage you guys to get out there and use your skills and gifts in the experiences, in the partnerships, to come alongside those partners in a good way. I've long said that it's a lot easier to keep someone in the field who's already been called there than it is to get new folks out the door. And
Exactly.
so not that God can't do both, right, Scott? But it's, hey, if they're there, how do we support them? How do we find a way to come alongside them and make their world easier in some ways? Which is why I love the heartbeat behind Switchboard as well, because you're able to kind of come in and say, hey, we can help you and take some of the stress off your plate, right?
Yeah, there are very few things in my life where you bring two people together and both of them look at you and say, thank you. They're like, I can't believe someone found somebody that is a Christian that can help my 16-year-old get into the right college. And I can't believe I could actually use my college advising skills to work with the missionaries so that they could stay in the field. They're like, wow, that was so cool. So I got a pretty cool job, I have to admit.
Yeah, I love it. And one of the pieces I love most is just these kind of conversations and the chance to just kind of hang out with you and with others in this space that are really doing some great work. And it's so fun, Scott.
It is, it's super fun.
That is awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. And we look forward to hearing lots more from globalswitchboard.io and
Woo-hoo.
from what you guys are doing, and to see how God starts to use that and operate to get us out of a scarcity mindset into a more abundant mindset of what God can do when we start to give our gifts back to him. Right.
Love
So
it.
that's
Thank you,
exciting. So
brother.
thank you for
Really
your time.
appreciate all you do. Yeah. All right. Take care. Bye now.
Hey, everyone. So glad that we had that conversation with Scott today. Again, that was Scott Elequin, the executive director, CEO of Switchboard, and really appreciated his time and just looking at technology from a couple different perspectives. One from the private versus nonprofit or church-based, kingdom-based, but also just some of the mental models of looking at life a little bit differently, about the skills and the talents that you've been given and how do we engage in that. So check out more in the show notes and go ahead and subscribe to the channel and do what you need to here. But I'm so excited to have these conversations and bring more of them to you. For now, have a great day. Bye.